Some news stories just inform you, others hit you right in the chest if you follow the Chargers every single day, and today is absolutely the second kind. Justin Herbert's offense is sitting in the middle of decisions that could change the weight of this team. The market is still leaving doors open, and the next few choices could be the difference between a promising roster and one that people actually fear. So stick around, because what's taking shape in Los Angeles deserves this fan base's full attention. This is not just about a pre-draft visit. It's about what that visit says about how the Chargers are thinking right now. Because while a big part of the fan base is looking at the draft and thinking almost only about another wide receiver for Justin Herbert, this franchise might be looking at a different path to make this offense stronger, cleaner, and harder to defend. And honestly, I can see the logic. Oscar Delp is not the kind of name that shows up with huge headlines attached to it, but this feels like a clue, and a real one. Delp is not the kind of prospect who walks into the news cycle looking like an instant answer or some national headline waiting to happen. But real football is not built only on flashy names. Sometimes the difference between a good offense and one you can actually trust comes from these less glamorous fits. These players who expand what a coordinator can do without forcing the entire system to bend around them. And that is where this possibility starts getting really interesting to me. We are talking about a 6'5" tight end who can block, move well, and stay on the field in multiple situations. That matters a lot in an environment where Mike McDaniel is coming in to reshape the entire identity of this offense. When you have a coordinator with imagination, with a feel for motion, formation variation, and creating mismatches, having a moldable piece deeper in the rotation stops being a luxury and starts becoming a tool. Delp may not be the main answer in this offense, but he absolutely could be one of those pieces that makes the whole unit more unpredictable. And there is another layer here that the fan base cannot ignore. The Chargers already have a really exciting piece in Achane Gadsden as a receiving threat. Charlie Kolar gives you a more physical profile, more tied to blocking. The issue shows up when you look past those names and realize the depth still needs attention. And any roster that wants to survive a long season, injuries, tactical adjustments, and big games has to stop treating depth like a side issue. That is exactly where smart draft decisions start carrying real value. If this interest in Delp turns into a pick, I would see it as a sign of maturity. Not because he solves everything by himself, but because it would show a franchise trying to strengthen the structure of the offense instead of chasing only the obvious move. And for a team that finally wants to give Herbert an ecosystem worthy of his talent, that is also a form of aggression. This second story hits differently because it is not really about depth, adjustment, or slow burn planning. It is about nerve. It is about moving a player who still splits the fan base and opening the door for someone who could light this offense up almost instantly. And when the topic is Quentin Johnston potentially being part of a trade for Achane, I cannot look at that like it is just another rumor floating around. Because this kind of conversation goes straight to the middle of what the Chargers have to decide right now. Keep betting on what might still bloom, or go after what could change the team faster. Johnston is still a delicate subject on this roster. Not because the raw talent is not there, not because he lacks physical tools, but because his trajectory still feels unfinished. There have been flashes. There have been moments that remind you why he was a first-round pick. But there have also been drops, disconnects, and that lingering feeling that the fit never looked fully natural. Now Mike McDaniel steps in with a very specific offensive vision, one built on timing, movement, separation, and explosiveness after the catch. And that is exactly where the question gets heavier. Is Johnston really part of this new blueprint, or has he become trade capital before the clock runs out? Then you look at Achane, and suddenly the conversation starts moving fast. Because we are not talking about just any running back. We are talking about a dynamic weapon who has already shown real production, real juice, and the ability to flip the field in an instant. A 24-year-old playmaker with rushing and receiving numbers that make any fan immediately imagine the stress he could put on defenses next to Herbert, Omarion Hampton, and Keaton Mitchell. He is the kind of piece that makes defenses hesitate. And in today's NFL, hesitation is everything. Of course, the cost messes with your head. Quentin Johnston, a former high draft asset plus meaningful picks for a running back who would eventually need a big payday? That is not some casual move. That is the kind of bet a franchise makes when it believes it has to win now. But a part of me keeps coming back to the same point. If McDaniel truly looks at Achane and sees him as a perfect extension of what he wants to build in Los Angeles, then the Chargers at least need to take the idea seriously. because it makes no sense to reshape the whole offense, hand the keys to a coordinator with that kind of vision, and then freeze up the second a piece shows up that fits his identity this well. If there is ever a time to think big, this is it. Now the temperature changes because this story hits the most ambitious, most restless, most hopeful side of the fan base. It is one thing to talk about a complimentary piece. It is another thing entirely to imagine a receiver like A.J. Brown wearing powder blue, stepping into Mike McDaniel's offense and giving Justin Herbert a dominant, physical, nasty target over the middle. That is not small talk. That is the kind of possibility that sends a fan's mind racing, because it hits the exact feeling that has followed the Chargers for way too long. The team feels close, but it still needs that one offensive star punch to become truly dangerous. And what keeps this topic alive is the setup around it. The Chargers addressed the offensive line. They adjusted the running back room. They gave attention to the tight end group. But at wide receiver, the picture still feels open, almost uncomfortably open. Quentin Johnston still hangs there as a player with an uncertain future. Keenan Allen is still sitting out there in free agency, and as long as that room stays unresolved, any rumor tied to an elite receiver is going to find traction in Los Angeles. There is just no way around that. A.J. Brown stays in this conversation because the fit, on paper, is ridiculous. He would not be just another addition. He would change the temperature of the entire offense. A receiver who wins with power, explodes on in-breaking routes, absorbs contact, punishes man coverage, and forces defenses to recalculate everything around him. Put that type of player next to Ladd McConkey, with Oronde Gadsden helping stretch and stress zones, and suddenly Herbert goes from working with good options to working with a real arsenal. And when a quarterback at his level feels like he can attack every area of the field without hesitation, that becomes a nightmare for any defense in the AFC. The wild part is that the math does not even feel impossible. The Chargers have cap space, they have flexibility, they have an asset like Johnston who still carries value because of his age, pedigree, and team control. So the debate is not really about whether the move can be built. It is about personality. It is about the question that follows this franchise every single time a major move is on the table. Is Joe Ortiz and this front office actually willing to act like a team trying to break through right now? Because that is where this gets hot. The biggest obstacle does not feel like the dream, it feels like the level of aggression needed to chase it. That is why this Chargers A.J. Brown connection keeps coming back. Not because anybody has already kicked the door open, but because the fit makes too much sense to disappear. And as long as the Eagles keep living with this noise, and the Chargers keep leaving their wide receiver room unfinished, that smoke is going to keep rising. To me, the feeling is simple. If there is a real chance to put a player like this in Herbert's hands, Los Angeles cannot keep acting like it is just managing the calendar. At some point, a true contender has to stop asking for permission. This latest clue hits me in a different way because it points right at something this fan base has been feeling for weeks now. The Chargers are still circling help for Justin Herbert, and it does not feel accidental. KC Concepcion visiting Los Angeles right at the end of the pre-draft visit window does not feel like calendar filler. It feels intentional. It feels like a franchise that knows it cannot walk into this new offensive era asking Herbert to carry everything while the receiver room still has too many question marks hanging over it. And there is something here that I think matters as much emotionally as it does analytically. When a name like Concepcion closes this stage with visits to the Chargers and 49ers, after also meeting with a long list of other teams, what you see is not just league-wide curiosity. You see value. You see a prospect who is making different offenses think, different coaching staffs look harder, different franchises imagine what more speed, versatility, and energy could do for their receiver rooms. To me, that is already a very good sign. His numbers at Texas A&M were not modest, and they were not empty. 61 catches, 919 yards, and 9 touchdowns in one season after transferring from NC State tells you this was real production, real adaptation, real impact. The kind of output that says a player does not need forever to find his footing. And when I place that inside the Chargers' current situation, the connection gets way too interesting to dismiss. This offense needs players who make life easier for Herbert, players who arrive and force defenses to respect more than one or two focal points. What I like most about this possibility is that it does not feel desperate. It feels current. It feels modern. Concepcion represents youth, burst, and the chance to inject something alive into a position group that still needs a firmer identity. I am not talking about him like a lone savior because no serious offense should depend on that. I am talking about a piece who could walk into a room still looking for shape and help push it forward at a moment when Mike McDaniel clearly wants to leave his stamp on this unit. And honestly, I like when the franchise sends this kind of signal before the draft. It shows intention. It shows Los Angeles is not just sitting back waiting for the board to fall into its lap. It is studying, digging, and trying to find fits that make sense for the present and for what this offense could become very soon. Now I want to hear from the fan base. If KC Concepcion is there in the right range, are you pounding the table to bring him to Los Angeles? Or do you still think the bigger priority has to be a different kind of weapon? If you ask me what I think when I look at all four of these stories together, my answer is simple. The Chargers are staring at an opportunity they cannot treat with caution. I see a team that has already started reshaping the offense, that is studying new weapons, that still has a chance to get aggressive in the market, and that needs to stop acting like slow growth is always enough. Herbert deserves a more dangerous supporting cast right now, not 2 cycles from now. That is the whole point for me. Los Angeles has the pieces to make a real jump, but it will only happen if this franchise is willing to hit the gas. So stay with me, because this stretch could define a lot.